Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Ki Tisa, beginning in Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, in chapter 30, with verse 11. And in the beginning of the parasha, we find the commandment of the half shekel. Later on in this Torah portion, we have the staggering event of the golden calf, with all of its implications. It was a earth-shattering event. It was a very low point, obviously, in the history of the Jewish people, to make such a terrible blunder and, if you would, theological error, just 40 days after the giving of the Torah. And God, of course, was very annoyed with his people, and through the intervention of Moshe Rabbeinu, our master Moses, who, with the attribute of great selfless love for his people and self-sacrifice, was able to intervene and, as it were, set things straight, we find that the further we delve into the concept of the golden calf, and we look at all of the commentators of old, and we look at the insight of our great sages, we find that things are not quite as simple as they would appear. We find that the real criticism of Israel in this incident was not so much from a viewpoint of looking at this incident like raw idolatry. For in fact, we find that God readily forgave them. We find that a comparatively few number of people were consumed, in other words, were punished with death for this incident. Rather, our sages point out on a fine level, it wasn't so much an issue of actual idolatry, although this was a blunder, and it was, in fact, something that was orchestrated by and heavily under the influence of the mixed multitude, who definitely had very insincere motivation. When it comes to the core of the body of Israel, who certainly knew who God is, certainly knew that he has no form, we find on a very deep level of understanding a concept that the major aspect of the sin was not so much in raw, rank idolatry and thinking that this golden calf was God, but rather that the Jewish people committed the error, and in fact it is a fatal error, of giving in to a certain kind of need for something tangible to focus on, for some sort of, if you would, intermediary, something to be able to use as a focal point, as a contact point, as an interface, because the concept of the God of heaven and earth without beginning and without end is so great, it can bring a person to a certain degree of feeling very vulnerable and out of control. And the major aspect, according to these commentators and according to this tradition, it's a very deep insight, their problem was really in a certain aspect, a certain degree of wanting to be in control, of wanting to know that everything is in order, goes a certain way according to our expectations, no surprises. It's a question also of timing. They had to have it exactly when they wanted it, this access or this certain kind of interface with a divine connection. There's a whole idea here that we learn about, that Moses' timing was off, they thought, that they were expecting him to return from the mountain on a certain day, and he tarried, and therefore they basically had some sort of a breakdown collectively because they needed him to be their point of focus. And without that, they just went berserk, theologically, needing something to focus on. It's an aspect of being in this world, and maybe it's a lack of spiritual maturity that we still suffer from today. This idea of people really needing to be able to fix on certain things and for everything to make sense. And of course, if we believe in Hashem, we all want to say that we believe in God, then we want to be able to say that everything has to make sense and everything has to be very clear to us. And of course, the truth is that sometimes things are not clear to us, and this does not mean that there is no God, and it doesn't shake the faith and understanding of a person who really has a connection to God. Not everything always makes sense, and sometimes things don't make sense to us, but we know perfectly well that in the grand scheme of things, they do make sense in Hashem's world. So I find it interesting, having said all of this, this is the parsha of this concept of needing something perhaps sometimes. And it is a failing, certainly. It is considered by our sages to be a fault, if we look at this aspect of what the golden calf was really all about. Well, after Moshe Rabbeinu, after Moses makes his entreaty and demonstrates his total selflessness for his people by saying, well, if you want to wipe out the Jewish people, then include me and erase my name from your book. And of course, we could speak at great length just about what that really means. It's amazing. But after all of this, and after Moshe's prayer was accepted, basically he says, and there's something else also that I would like. Seeing that this is an opportune time, a time of divine grace and will, that you have accepted my prayer, there's something else that I want to know. And we find in chapter 33 in the book of Exodus that Moshe says in verse 18, he says, "Show me your glory. I pray, I beseech you, show me your glory." And there's a very amazing tradition about these mysterious words. There's a whole conversation going on here, which is perhaps one of the most abstract conversations that's recorded in the Torah, and it would take half a lifetime to really delve this and understand all the different aspects of what this is all about. But Moshe said, "Show me your glory." And our rabbis tell us an amazing tradition that Moshe was really asking Hashem and saying to God, I want to understand the answer to a question that's plaguing me. A very major question, and of course this is one of the oldest and most serious questions in the history of the world that all people eventually grapple with. And that question is, why do good people suffer in this world? Why do the righteous suffer? Why do sometimes we see bad people prosper and seemingly go unpunished, and yet good people suffer? And our rabbis tell us that when Moshe said to God, "Show me, if I have found favor until now in your eyes, show me your glory," that actually he was referring to this mystery. Explain to me, please. I want to know, I want to understand why good people suffer. And God, of course, told him, "No man sees my face and lives." You can only see in retrospect from the back. This is something that you can't understand in this world. Now, we could really spend a tremendous amount of time on this great mystery, but let's just look at it for a moment and ask ourselves, after the debacle of the golden calf and all that encompasses that history-changing event, and especially in the light of how we're trying to understand it, that it was really an attempt at maintaining some sort of order in an otherwise unorderly world, and it was a great mistake because we can't always be in control. We can't always have the feeling that we understand the order. Why now is Moshe asking, why do good people suffer? And why is he couching it in these words? Why is this an allusion to that age-old question? Show me your glory. I think one answer is because a person who really wants to feel connected to the Holy One, blessed be He, a person who really believes in God and in divine providence and realizes that there is an order, even if we can't see it, but knows that that order is never compromised. When that person sees that there are things that don't make sense, and to other people certainly don't make sense, and things that can be perceived or interpreted as some sort of lack of divine providence in some place or niche in the scheme of things where God's hand wasn't present, the person feels that that is a desecration of God's name, because we want everything to be orderly, we want everything to be a reflection of Hashem's presence as we understand it, because that, we feel, is a reflection of God's honor. In other words, when people look in the world and see apparent injustice, that is like a dishonoring of God. If God indeed runs the world with justice, then that, God forbid, is some sort of reflection on His system, and we feel is some sort of blemish on His honor. So Moshe said, show me your glory, meaning the secret of your glory. I want to understand how even a situation where I see and people see apparent injustice, it's still, you are in control, and there is no reflection or diminishment of your glory. And of course, this is a very great question that is a central theme in the Tanakh, Many verses relate to this concept, and of course the bottom line is that ultimately we do believe that everything is for the good, that everything does come forth from God, and that everything is part of a master plan. Even the things that don't make sense to us, even the things that we would like to be able to wrap up very neatly in a little ball and be able to feel that we understand the Seder of the cosmos, the order of everything. Sometimes it isn't like that. But the central theme and bottom line of our existence as subjects of the King, as creatures in God's world, we know that everything truly is a reflection of His glory, whether we understand it or not. And even this great mystery, the mystery of apparent injustice, is actually just a part of a very grand plan and scheme with which the Holy One, blessed be He, runs the world. And the deeper that we delve into the Torah, and the more that we learn, the more that we begin to understand that we are only slowly beginning to perceive and to fathom the great mystery of the Torah.